Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast for November 2nd, 2023. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan, back in Canada after a lengthy trip overseas. Mark, great to be back with you and great to be chatting a little bit about some of the more interesting things going on in the world of CX.
Yeah, and great to be past Halloween and now into the, coasting towards the end of the year. Certainly, I've seen all the memes going out where now that we've got rid of the pumpkins, we can get Mariah Carey on the stereo again.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Love Actually is going to be playing on pretty well every television set over the course of the next couple of months. But, that's what the end of the year is all about. And we've got a really exciting show, though, today, Mark, to talk a little bit about what's going on that I think a lot of people will be engaging with from a CX perspective, and that is digital interactions. Now, I had the chance to catch up with Nerys Corfield, who is the founder of Injection Consulting. She's based in South Wales, and we had a long chat that was prompted by a post she had put on LinkedIn several weeks ago, where she had brought up some concerns about how non-voice interaction had gone with a particular retail bank. And we dove into the issue about digital interaction. We dove into some of the nuances around what some of the challenges around non-voice support are going through. And a real takeaway from me in this conversation with Nerys, which was absolutely fascinating, was the fact that we both agreed upon the element that so many organizations are placing huge levels of standard of care when it comes to voice delivery, but they seem a little bit more lax when it comes to things like web chat, like email, like social media interactions. And considering the extent to which non-voice interactions are growing as a percentage of total channel traffic, this could be a disaster for a lot of enterprises that take their eyes off the ball.
Yeah, that's interesting. And certainly down here in Brazil, WhatsApp is very much the sort of primary channel for many interactions. Like I have engagement with my bank, with my insurance company, and all across the board. From the barber to the bank, really. So digital interactions are very much a primary sort of point of contact here, and I see that. Different organizations do it in different ways, but certainly I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion to compare and contrast this to the voice channel.
Couldn't agree more. And, as far as Nerys and myself were concerned, over the course of our discussion, organizations that are deploying different digital channels need to cop on very quickly, because it's going to end up costing them business. And over the course of the 15, 20-minute chat that we engaged in, we spoke about a few best practices that enterprises as well as their outsourcing partners need to think about in terms of making sure that any non-voice interaction is going to be as rock solid as possible.
So why don't we go straight to your conversation with Nerys Corfield?
Looking forward to it.
The CX Files this week is very excited to welcome our friend Nerys Corfield, who is the founder of Injection Consulting and who joins us from her home in South Wales. Nerys, really appreciate you taking some time to have a chat with us on the CX Files today.
It's a pleasure, Peter. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're more than welcome. And we were enjoying some banter talking about the linguistic nuances of where you live and where I live, with both of which I think have some commonalities, but certainly have their own particularities as well, as I'm trying to adapt a French word into English. Too many syllables is challenging for me, especially given the fact that I'm incredibly jet lagged, having just gotten back from Georgia, not the state, but the country. So apologies for my pronunciation nuances on my side.
Dim problem, as we'd say in Wales.
This is getting off to a great start. So, Nerys, one of the things that we're here to talk about is a post that you put on LinkedIn a number of weeks ago, and it had to do with a major fail with regards to a chat system that you were dealing with. I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about what that challenge was that you faced in terms of this chat interaction that you were having or trying to have as a way of setting up the discussion for the course of the next 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, no worries. I guess as a bit of backstory, so what had happened was I wanted to make a donation and to a charity, and it was seen that actually it would be great to buy an Amazon gift card for a raffle. And I think I was on an erroneous website. And so it was weird. Everything about it was weird. So I was on clearly a ghosted Amazon site. But you know what happens when you're busy anyway. I put the thing through, and then I was on my bank website looking at payments, and it was pending. And I was like, see, I knew that was dodgy because that was days and days ago that I put that through. Why is that pending? So I wanted to just cancel that payment for it not to go through, because I did a bit more investigation. So that was my objective in starting the chat. And of course, there was no telephone number to be found. So chat was the default path of communication set out for me. So really, what I wanted to say was, please, can you cancel that pending transaction that's on my account? That was it. But that took an hour and a half. And the reason it took an hour and a half was because the advisor who was answering the questions had the level of concurrency on the number of chats that they were able to handle set far too high for their capability. So there was a real long lag between my question and their then answer. And it was one of those where you're like, hello, hello. And then ultimately I got deferred and deferred again to somebody else, who then ultimately said, oh, well, don't worry about it because we can't do anything about it at this stage. You're going to have to wait for it to go through, and then you're going to have to wait 14 days after that to get the refund back after you've proven it was fake. And I was just like, why? You could have told me that in the first couple of minutes. And then to exacerbate my frustration, and I think the bit that really frustrated me further wasn't the advisor's fault, because I really am quite sure that this was edicted to them as a sort of process. When I said I want to complain, they said, can you let me know what impact this has had on you?
Come on. You can't make this stuff up. You just can't make this up.
Who thought that was a good idea, Peter? Like literally, who determined that in a state of now, just by virtue of the fact that I have been on a chat to ask a relatively simple question, I'm assuming, obviously it does take some investigation, diagnostics, whatever. Who decided that, actually their length of this chat is disproportionately long for the simplicity of the question. But what we're going to do is ask what impact that's had, thus giving me effort to explain. I'm not going to explain what impact it's had. Just know that I'm annoyed. And, I've been very genial to the advisor, but I did say to them, your concurrency, because that's the joy of being in this world.
Exactly. Yeah. We know the terms.
We know the terms is set to, you've got too many people. And I think, look, I was compelled to publicly put it on LinkedIn because I just felt like these things happen all too often. And I have got quite a good following on LinkedIn. So I was just like, right, I'm so tamping, as my post stated, which is a Welsh term for very, very cross.
I'm going to remember that because I actually found myself tamping in my own right over the course of the weekend due to a disruption in my travel coming back to Canada. Now, I had a very similar situation to you, Nerys. What happened was I was having trouble getting through to the contact center for this particular airline. When I was waiting for a flight, there were no gate agents. So it was recommending to go on to web chat. I was faced with incompetent chatbots that just were taking me around in circles. I then got on to somebody whose level of concurrency was clearly far too high for any capabilities and who just either wouldn't or couldn't answer questions. So this is not something that I think just you and I have been experiencing of late. More and more organizations are trying to push people to digital solutions as a means of interacting with agents. But more and more, we're faced with archaic or idiotic RPA systems in terms of the chatbots that are in place. We're being faced with people who are overloaded, can't do their jobs properly, and consumers like you and I are typing, "Excuse me, are you there? Excuse me, ... or question mark, question mark, question mark." So my question to you then, Nerys, would be, based on the fact that we have so many different organizations that are effectively not just pushing, but shoving us towards these digital means, are they really taking seriously the ability to properly communicate to a level of expectation or exceeding expectation when it comes to a CX angle?
I think in the main, the answer has to be no. I think, if we sort of think those intent-based chatbots are all 1.0, there's not many good examples of them being able to contain a conversation and end-to-end facilitate it, unless it's something super easy. But I've had an experience with an airline recently myself, and you just find yourself typing advisor, 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 because you are just not getting the answers. And then it asks that really irritating question: was this helpful? No, it wasn't helpful. Nope. It clearly wasn't helpful. So I think there's such, like you say, there's this there's not a nudge towards driving channel shift and pushing people into ideally chatbots and then reluctantly live advisor interactions, which they try and secure then commercial benefit from by giving them really high concurrency that is not driving a good CSAT. So no, all too often chatbots and then live chat are inefficient, ineffective, and cause a lot of consumer frustration. So not doing a great job as the forerunner for what should be a much better experience once generative AI and everything that is going to then sort of facilitate. We're already a bit turned off by the experience of chatbots. So yeah, it's just supremely frustrating to have bad experiences.
And here's an interesting one for you. At the CX Outsourcers event that we hosted in Las Vegas about a year ago, we had a futurist speaker, Stephanie Todd from Soul CX, a podcaster who does just an amazing job. And Steph presented a number of very provocative ideas about where she saw the industry going. One of the things she pointed to that I think really put a light bulb on over everybody's head, it certainly did to mine, was that she said voice as a channel is going to increase in demand amongst consumers. And you can see why when people are having these inherently difficult interactions using chatbot systems where they're very clearly under-resourced, they're underfunded, they're using archaic technology. It's logical that somebody will just say, to heck with this, I'm going to just put down my mouse and I'm going to pick the phone up.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think the reality is that self-service journeys should be becoming more effective. So for a lot of interactions that you want to have with a company, you should be able to self-serve. And it's those that you can't, where it's high complexity or high urgency or high emotion, that you need to reach out outside of that self-service. And the offer of different channels is, your social direct messaging, which is facilitated by chat and voice. And, I found myself speaking to so many different businesses in the last 2 months. It's been crazy. And sometimes you can go a very long time without speaking to any sort of business. But I've spoken to sort of a charity, a bank, 2 airlines, a hotel, a limo chauffeur company. And it's really interesting, the difference of experiences in all of those. And I'd say that some stood out a lot more than others in their ability to service the voice channel effectively.
Okay, Nerys, I will tell you, we've talked a lot about some of the challenges that are going on, but I'm a glass half full kind of guy. In fact, you can see I've got my coffee cup, still got half a cup of coffee in it, that I'm enjoying while we're chatting here. So let me ask you, what do you see as some of the best examples that you've picked up on either in your personal life as a consumer or professionally as an expert in the CX domain where non-voice channels are being used effectively? What are some of the elements to a successful digital non-voice interaction?
Okay, yeah. So I guess a lot of it is in my professional life because I do a lot of auditing customer journeys and auditing the whole interaction management of contact centers for lots of different brands. So I think it's really about taking those journeys from an outside in perspective, not using really industry or vertical sector vernacular, which is really common and like brands don't even think about it, and just making it super easy. I do quite a lot of judging as well, Peter, and I think those that really set themselves apart as being effective are those in which they've really truly considered the customer journey. And it's so hard because there are so many different types of ways in which a customer might be looking to interact and lots of reasons why they might be looking to interact and how they express why they're looking to interact. So it doesn't come without its challenges, but I think there's a real logical outside in perspective that should be applied. And all too often that common sense seems to be lacking and just be shrouded in this complexity undertaken by the digital teams and the IT teams and everybody that gets involved and just overcomplicates everything.
Yeah, the expression "too many cooks in the kitchen" comes to mind in these situations. And that leads me to my next question, Nerys. We're being overloaded with not just digital as a means of interacting, but different digital channels. The tree of options that you've got is really quite pronounced. And, it's funny, at Ryan Strategic Advisory, we do an annual survey each year where we ask enterprise contact center decision makers about the channels that they're deploying. And if I compare the channels today versus what maybe even 4 or 5 years ago, there's an infinite number that are more that are that didn't exist even a few years ago. Like I'll tell you, kiosks, video kiosk as an example, the metaverse. These are things that are all starting to pop up. When we're thinking about the digital channels that enterprises might be deploying, which ones do you think are probably the most vulnerable right now for bad interactions with consumers? Which are the ones do you feel that enterprises need to be focused on in terms of making them watertight?
I think WhatsApp is funny because perhaps in the US, WhatsApp isn't such a prevalent channel, certainly in UK and Europe. Yep. WhatsApp, it's got some great business cases around it because it's such a prevalently used communication chat channel. And of course, it does voice and video as well. So there's a lot of businesses in UK and Europe that are really using WhatsApp. And as such, I wonder whether that will traverse the Atlantic and for once we'll be the trendsetters for North America to follow. But Apple Business Chat is another one that's really prevalent over there, not so much over here. So there's a real geographic delineation in terms of which are the platforms and the chats, the digital channels that consumers might use that need to be aware of. But I'm not sure. I think some of them, it's interesting because you talk to some customers and of course they really want to push X or Facebook direct messenger or LinkedIn sometimes, and you're like, LinkedIn, you're a B2C environment. Why do you want LinkedIn direct messaging? So I think it all really depends on really having that clear view of the consumer base and making sure that you've got channels that, don't go on Instagram, don't go on TikTok if your average customer age is 84. It's sort of stuff like that that really needs to be considered, because there's a real tendency to just want to offer all digital channels, and that proliferation leads to much more complexity. So I think the reality is it's just be very clear on the couple of digital channels that work best for your audience and just service those really, really well.
You've kind of anticipated, or as we'd say in French, tu as devancé my next question. In that sense, though, beyond knowing your consumer base, which I think is an outstanding piece of advice, what would maybe be the one or two other pieces of counsel you would give an enterprise CX decision maker, or for that matter, an outsourcing digital channel manager, in terms of what they need to do to make sure going into 2024, their non-voice interactions and strategies are as rock solid as possible?
And I guess that's really interesting, Peter, in so much as it feels very siloed at the moment in organizations, that you have got this digital interaction management team and then this voice interaction management team. And that's becoming even more wedded to, because of generative AI and the understanding of how those use cases are going to service generative AI. But I would encourage customers to think about their interaction landscape really clearly and think about the interactions alongside the customers that should always be serviced on the best channel for them, and that might be voice. And therefore allow that voice channel to be there for those customers and be on that channel. And when it is digital, make sure obviously there's an ability to traverse into an escalated live advisor channel as and if the need dictates. And then just be really clear on the metrics that you're going to assess to measure the effectiveness of that interaction, and make sure it's consistent across all channels, because I think there is there's this real bias towards being more lenient on the digital channels as opposed to the scrutiny that the voice channel goes under. So I think there should be an equity in assessment and a review, consistent review of the metrics that are really driving a good, positive customer service experience and making it easy.
I think what you just raised there is so important, excuse me, about that equity with the digitals alongside the voice, because now so many organizations are saying we're not doing voice anymore. At least we're having this in North America. I had a very bad situation not long ago with a food ordering app where they would not give a voice option, and they were just pushing you towards a chat system that was clearly substandard. They've lost a customer in me because I was not being able to get my questions answered and my order fulfilled. But I think that you raised that as an outstanding piece of advice. Standards are standards. KPIs are KPIs, whether it's voice or digital. And on that happy note, Nerys, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us today. It's really been illuminating. And I can only hope as we finish the year out and go into 2024 that enterprises and their outsourcing partners heed your advice that is extremely well-founded, and that we look forward to better digital interactions moving into the coming year.
Yes, hail to that.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.